The first step to installing a web server in your home is to download the appropriate software. So we're going to need two pieces of software are required. A third piece of software is optional, but it's very useful. The first two pieces of software that we're going to download is Virtualbox, which is a software that allows us to run other operating system from within our own operating system. So if you're running Windows or the Mac operating system, um, running VirtualBox, you could run the Linux operating system, which is what we're going to need to run our web server. And the other piece of software is going to be Debian, the Debian operating system. So let's start with VirtualBox. So let's go to Google. Let's look for VirtualBox download. And here we go. Let's click on this link. Now this link gives us the download page, download build 6 or whatever the latest build is. The Windows version, because I'm running Windows. Now VirtualBox is available for a lot of operating systems, so it's a good thing. I don't see the Mac OS here, but it should have the Mac somewhere, I think. Okay, once we downloaded the software, let's install it. This installation is not the fastest installation because I'm actually running it from within VirtualBox itself. I already had this software installed in my computer, and I didn't want to uninstall it and install it to show you how it works. So I installed it. I installed Windows in VirtualBox, and I'm installing it from VirtualBox itself. That's why it's a little bit slow. Okay, so we're done. It installed. We could finish. Now that that's installed, our next step is to download the Linux operating system, which is going to be running a web server. So here it is. This is VirtualBox. This is the latest version. I have a slightly older version running on my real Windows operating system. That's where I'm actually going to show you how to install Debian. But no matter what version you have, the process is the same. So the next step is to download the Debian operating system. Now, why am I downloading Debian? Download and install an image. I could download any Linux operating system out there. There's hundreds of different variations of the Linux operating system. This one, it's very easy to install. It has a nice graphical user interface to install things. So you're gonna see that the process of installing the web server, it's gonna be very simple with this one. There's a lot of different versions of Debian. Um, the web server doesn't have to be something which is very resource intensive. It's something very simple. So I'm gonna download the 386 version. I actually have a 64-bit operating system, so I could download the 64-bit, but the 386 will work on even old computers. So I'm gonna download this version. Okay, so now we're downloading the Debian operating system. The next step is showing you how to install the operating system so that you have a web server up and running. After that, I'm going to show you how to install a bit of software called No IP, which will allow your web server to be accessible from the outside world by giving people an address, an IP address, a computer address, a computer name. So you give them a URL, an address, and they'll be able to see your work that you have in your computer and your web server at home, which is very neat. Okay, so let's finish downloading Debian. Okay, so that completes our first part. The first part was the download. So we downloaded the two essential things, which is VirtualBox and Debian. With those two things, we'll pretty much have a web server up and running in our computer. Okay. The next step is going to be to show you the installation process of Debian itself in VirtualBox. Okay, so now we're going to install the operating system where we're going to have a web server. So we run Oracle VirtualBox. We create a new virtual machine. We're going to call it web. It's going to be a Linux machine, and it's going to be Debian 32-bit. That's what I pick. We don't really need that much memory. I'm gonna give it 1024, which is more than enough, but 512 should have been enough. So, but I'm gonna give it 1024 just because I got a lot of memory uh, extra on my system right now. So let's do that. Let's create a hard drive. Now let's make the hard drive 100 gig. Okay. Now that we created that, let's set up one more thing. Let's go into network. Let's make this a bridge adapter. Let's go into storage, and let's select the image of Debian that we downloaded. I already have it here, which is 9.2. Now that we have everything set up, we could start the virtual machine. Okay, so let's do a graphical installation. This is why I like Debian. It does things pretty simple. So we just follow the instructions. We want English. I'm in the United States. I know American English. It's doing setting up a few things. So let's just walk through the steps. Okay, we gotta give it a host name. We could use Debian. That's fine. Domain name, we could skip this. I'm gonna have to set up a root password. So let me set the password up. Re-enter the password. I gotta enter my full name. Then it's gonna create an account using my first name, which is fine. I gotta choose a password for my account. I am in New York, so that makes me Eastern. Okay, we're gonna partition a hard drive and set it up. Now I'm just gonna use the default guided setup. So let's pick guided, use entire disk. Let's pick the disk we're gonna use. It says that for beginner, it recommends putting all the file in one partition. Now I do not recommend this. I don't know if this fixed this problem, but in the past, if a partition goes bad and you had everything in one partition, pretty much the whole thing became useless, and you had to reinstall the whole operating system again. But if you put it in separate partition and one of the partition goes bad, the root partition is still working and it could fix automatically the bad partition. So I do not like putting everything in one partition. They used to give me a lot of problems when anything used to go bad. I'm going to separate everything. Okay, so this is how it's going to divide the hard drive up, right? Now, just one thing. I'm going to let it go, but this is not what we really want. Later on, I'm going to actually change this. Since this is going to be a web server, we want all the hard drive space to go in the directory where we're going to have a web pages, right? Because we don't know how big a website is going to be. We don't know how many images, video files, or whatever we're going to have there. This is actually putting most of the hard drive space in the home directory, which is now where the web server website is running. The website is running under the var directory, and it's only allocating a fraction of the space, not nearly as much. But for this demo purposes, I'm gonna just pick the default. But what we want to make this the biggest, as big as possible, so we have a lot of space for everything that we want to do with the website. Write changes, yes, because we're gonna accept this. I'm actually going to go through the entire installation process, uh, but you might want to, if this takes long, you might want to skip from time to time forward on the video. But I'm going to go through the entire process so you could see how it works, okay? Now, I decided to install Debian 9, not Debian 10. Debian 10 was the latest installation, but Debian 10 didn't have some software installed by default, which I like using. This installs some software, which I'm going to show you later on, which is by default, which I makes installing stuff on Debian a lot easier. Okay, this is my installation. Do you want to scan another CD? No, we don't want to scan any more CDs. We only have one image. We want to configure package manager. I'm in the United States. Using the FTP Debian org site, that's fine. Proxy, nope. We gotta skip this. Okay. I also decided to install a 32-bit version of the operating system instead of the 64-bit version because 32-bit is good enough. I mean, we don't really need a lot of resources for this. Okay, do I want to participate in this anonymous statistic thing? I do not want to do that, so let's skip this. Okay, so this is where it allowed me to install the initial software. I like using the GNOME interface, the GNOME Classic, so I'm going to pick that. And since we're using this as a web server, let's pick the web server. That's pretty much the only thing we're going to need to pick. What we need to pick for now. Once the installation is done, we're going to install PHP because I use PHP and something else. That thing you saw popping up a minute ago on the bottom was me closing the browser because I'm gonna reopen it in a minute. Again, you might want to skip to the end of the installation. I'm just gonna wait through it, so I'm gonna record all of it. So it's receiving all the file. It's gonna get ready to install all of them. You need an internet connection for this because it's getting everything from the internet. when you're waiting for it to finish, it feels like a long time, but it's not that long. Okay, we're about 2/3 of the way. Oh, the screen fell asleep for a minute. Let me move the mouse so it turns back on. This has kind of a screensaver software that if you don't use it for a while, it kind of turns off. So just move your mouse. If it goes black, it'll come right back up. There is installing Apache. Apache is the web server. We almost finished. Okay, it's cleaning up. Great. Do we want to install the bootloader? Yes, we do. Where do you want to install it? In the hard drive. We only have one, so that's the one. Okay, so right now it's saying that it's gonna restart the the virtual machine, the computer, so that it gets ready to start the operating system to make sure that we don't have any CDs in the CD drive. Well, we have the ISO image, so we got to remove that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into CDs and I'm gonna select my actual DVD drive because I know I don't have anything in the drive. So when you remove it, just go to your regular DVD drive if it's empty. Okay, so now let's continue, and it's restarting the system. We're gonna get ready to use it for the first time. Okay, so that's our operating system. It's getting ready to start. So this is the bootloader. It's gonna load the operating system. Okay. Okay, so this is my login screen. I'm gonna log in as Sergio Fernandez. Before I log in, I'm gonna choose the GNOME Classic interface. So GNOME Classic, perfect. So now I'm gonna enter my password and start. Okay, so this is my desktop environment. I want to install PHP because I'm going to use PHP in my web server and another application. So what we do is we go to System Tools. We pick the Synaptic Package Manager. This is why I picked version 9. In version 10, this is missing. You probably have to install it manually, but this is already pre-installed, which I like. Enter my password. Okay, just information. Okay, so let's search for PHP. Okay, so let's scroll down until we see PHP. Scroll down. No, we do not want to select that. Let's just scroll down. PHP, there. We want to pick this one to install. Mark for installation. Yes, install all of that. And we want to install one more thing. We want to install a bit of software called Nautilus Admin. So let's search for Nautilus. That's a graphical user interface that allows us to, here we go, Nautilus Admin. It's okay. It's an extension that allows you to do file management and some administrative actions. It adds an option to your, when you right click on objects and folders and objects, that allows you to modify them as administrator. The easy way. So let's pick that. I'll show you what it is. Okay. Okay. So now we pick those two things which I want to install, and let's install them. So I'll apply. Let's apply. It's installing PHP, which is something that gets used a lot. I mean, a website that doesn't have this kind of software it's very limited. At least on Linux. Okay, so that's it. So now we install PHP. Great. Okay, so let's see if it's installed. Let's go to, I could use the web browser in Debian, or I could use the web browser in my Windows operating system. I'm going to use my Windows operating system, so you know that outside of Debian you can see it. Okay, so let's open up the browser. Let me minimize the browser for a second. Let's see what is our IP address. Okay, this is kind of slow, but we'll wait. Click on it right. Let's go back again. Wired connection, wired settings. Okay, there we come up. Okay, so right now our IP address is 192.168.0.12. Okay, so if we type that IP address in the browser, let me bring up the browser. Let me bring up the browser again. And I type that the IP address 192.168.0.12, and I press enter. Apache Debian default page, it works. Okay, so our website is installed properly. Now, let's go back to Debian. Let's close this out. Where is our web page saved in Debian? We go to places computer var www, that's where our website is at, HTML. So this is our web where we store our web pages and all our information. Right now it has a page called index. So we want to modify that page to whatever else we want to do. We don't want it to be the default page. So let me just change it, okay? To change it, you have to have administrative rights. So that's why I added now Natalis. I just right click. I say edit as administrator. That's the button that I added. Let me enter my password. And now I can modify this page, right? So let me actually delete everything and write just simply hello world. So let me delete this. Okay, so I just wrote hello world. Let me save that. Now let me go back to my browser and let me reload this page. And there you go. It says hello world. So pretty much we could put whatever we want. Now I'm going to do one more thing before I finish this part of the video. Right now, the IP address 192.168.0.1.12, it's dynamic. It changes. It could change every time you log in, and that's not good. You want to have a fixed IP address so that every time you run your web server, you could always type that IP address, and your website will come up, right? So I'm gonna change some settings here. Okay, so we bring up the wired network. We click on this to change the settings. IPv6. Instead of having the address be automatically assigned, let's say we want to assign it manually. Okay, so let's pick any IP address. Okay, netmask. And the default gateway. Okay. The IP address is, you could pick anything you like. I just picked this number because 120 is pretty high, so I'm pretty sure nothing else will get assigned that IP address. Netmask. To be honest, I just put this number because I know it works. I'm not too familiar with the net masking, but just put this number. The gateway is usually the number one of your IP address. Your IP address may be different in your computer. Like some computers have 192.168.5 instead of 0.0, whatever it is. But usually the first one is the gateway. So now that I've set this IP up, let's hit apply. And let's close out of this. Let's close out of this. Now let's check. Okay, the IP address hasn't changed yet. So let me restart the server to make sure that the new IP address takes effect. Okay. Okay, so the machine rebooted. Let's see if the new IP address took effect. I didn't have to log in, I think, but let's log in. Okay. Wire connection, wire setting. Wire connection, wire setting. And there's the new IP address, 192.168.0.120. So now from now on, it's always going to be this address all the time. So every time you start your web server, you know that from any browser in your network, you could type that IP address and it's going to take you to the web page. So let's try that. Let's bring up the web browser. Before it was 192.168.0.12. Now it's 120. Enter. And again, it says hello world, so it's working. Okay, so now we have a web server. We could do any work. I'm gonna later on add something extra. Now, I set it a fixed IP address for two reasons. Every time I load the web server, I don't want a different IP address to come up and for me to have to figure out which IP address it is. I want it to be a fixed IP address all the time. And also, I want the outside world to be able to see my website. And for that, we pretty much need to give it a fixed IP address, because when we're going to do the port forwarding from your gateway, you need to give it an IP address where all the website requests from the outside world will get redirected to. I'll explain that more later on. But for now on, that's it. I walked you through the steps. This is what you need to do to set up a web server in your home. Okay. The final part and optional part of setting up a web server is having an URL, a name, point from the outside world to your website, to your web server, so that other people could see your work. Maybe somebody from a job or a friend, anybody from the outside world. So there are a lot of ways to set up an URL which is free, pointing to your website. I'm going to use a company called NoIP. So just give me a second. Let's go to Google. Okay. Search for NoIP. Sign up. Enter our email. Password. And a host name. We want the free version. Okay, so to activate it, we have to check our email.
Okay, this is the email. Just 1 second. Let's see what this is. It's very slow because I must have hit print. It's very slow because I'm running on a virtual server. So we get this email. We have to click on this button to confirm our account. Now my account is active. Great. Now the next step is to download the software that we need to install in our computer. So I click on download. And run the software. It's going to install it. Now I've already installed this, so I'm not going to hit and install because I don't know if it's going to override it, but let's see. I'm going to try to install it, but I've already installed this. Oh, it's installing it. Perfect. Ready to launch. Running. And to enter my username and password. So I created a website called Silicon Programmer 2 because I already had used Silicon Programmer. I don't want to use Silicon Programmer 2, so I'm going to actually, I'm going to type in for this one so you can see it. But the domain I'm going to be using, the URL, the website name I'm going to be using is siliconprogrammer.sites.net. That's the one I'm going to be using. But for this demo, I created Silicon Programmer 2.sites.net just because I already had created one. So I have to enter my email. And my password. And log in. Okay. Well, something I must have typed in the password wrong, but let's forget about that for a minute. I'm gonna use once you log in, you're gonna get this bit of software. Let me log in outside of the screen. Let's see. Hold on a second. Okay, so once you enter your username and your password, let me see let me see what's happened. Forgot password. Username. Okay, this is the right password. Okay, perfect. So we set it up. So now once we logged in, we select the website, which we pick the Silicon Programmer 2.sites.net. And that's it. We're up and running. Now we need to do one more thing. So now that we're up and running, we need to go to a router. Let's log in. What we're going to do now is, okay, so let's go to Firewall and port forwarding. What we need to do now is when a person types in the URL, the website name that we created, which is siliconprogrammer2.sites.net, it's going to send it to my computer's IP. But my computer is running at different machines. My main computer, the virtual machine for my web server, all of that. Now, what I need to do is to make sure that the request for the website gets forwarded to my web server, not somewhere else. So what I do, I go into my port forwarding. I say add. I create a name. So let's call this www for World Wide Web. Now the port for the websites is 80. That's the port for your regular website, 80. The IP address I picked for my web server was 120, so 192.168.0.120. And the local port is also 80. I didn't change any ports. It's still port 80. So once we do this, I click on add virtual server. I'm not going to do this because I already did it. And it's going to create this www inbound port 80. So everything that goes, all the requests for port 80 are going to get sent to my web server, which is in IP address 192.168.120. So let me start the web server. Just give it a few minutes. I'm not sure if you could see it, but I'm actually starting my web server from outside of Virtualbox. So I'm not sure if you could see it, but I'm just giving it a few minutes for my web server to start up. Once it starts up, I'm going to show you that the website is up and running. Okay, it's up and running. So I could go to my browser, type Silicon Programmer 2.sites.net. And when I hit enter, hello world, there you go. That was what I had put on my web page when I had created my web server. So it's up and running. So now, if I'm looking for a job and I want to show them my website skill, I could just leave my computer turned on and tell them to type in that URL in the web browser, and it'll take them to my work. Or if I want my friends from the outside world, from their houses, to see any work that I've done, I just give them the URL. They type it from their house, and it'll bring up my web pages and whatever work I've done. So that's it. That's all the steps that you need to set up a web server, all with free software and all done from the comfort of your home, completely free.